Um, look, um, I will take it on the chin here for all those who said, case, I didn't think so. Of course, I was trying to cover the trial based on the transcripts and where I felt the evidence led. Um, Apparently, I was not right. Um, you're allowed to be wrong. I made predictions on Substack and YouTube and X. I was wrong on this one. Jury of our peers, and I didn't see it. They didn't see it the same way. I'll just point out, for example, we look at the Lindsay Acree case. It was count two. She had ID'd Eric Yechezkel as her second attacker. She ID'd him in the um, lineup. And Eric Yechezkel wasn't in the country July 4th, weekend of 2011, and also wasn't in the country Memorial Day weekend of 2011. She identified him as her attacker, second attacker, served him civilly, claims she has a friend, Hannah, and that trafficked her to the Hamptons, but wasn't able to serve Hannah. And the jury of their peers found them guilty of this crime, or found Tal guilty. I think it's reasonable to ask how that's possible. Not a defense of the Alexander brothers. This is not a defense of their text messages or their friends' blogs or their view on women or whether or not they were good husbands or good sons or good in business. I'm strictly discussing whether or not they were truly, beyond a reasonable doubt, guilty of everything that they were charged with. And as I said, I don't know how I personally, with the facts that I knew, could find them guilty on many of these counts. But it's a jury system, and based on what is submitted in evidence, the jurors make a decision. Being able to read the notes, what's said in open court, perhaps I have different ideas than what the jurors would say. But again, it's just an opinion. I think also, in Jewish law, there's something about lashon hara, and lashon hara. There's a bad speech. There's a lot to be learned here about lashon hara, because part of the undoing of the Alexander brothers was kissing and telling. There was a few instances where they discussed their sexual exploits, and it's fair to say some of the women were not particularly thrilled with that. I know that came up in the Malin Garrett case in Aspen. And I'd also say there has been a lot of lashon hara when it comes to analyzing and discussing the Alexander brothers in general. I think the world would be a much better place if people actually confirmed everything they said and then took necessary action. There's so many times that people would say, oh, everybody knew that they were doing horrible things. Well, who is everybody, and when did everybody know? Because by saying that, you're implicating entire communities that allegedly knew about this horrible behavior and did nothing ever. And what does that say about people that knew about it? And as a father, it doesn't take me being a father or a brother, but as a father and a brother, I cannot understand knowing about heinous behavior and doing nothing, if that's what happened. Bull NQ says, hey, Daniel, I get the grotesque actions they did. However, the notes the jury sent out to the judge seemed like the judge really swayed. I don't know if it's me. I feel that way as well. I do think that it's clear the jury did not like them. and it's clear that the judge did not like them. I don't think that that's really a secret. Um, does that impact the ability of people to have a clear trial? Maybe. Look, as I said before, Alon Alexander's ex-girlfriend, Danielle Epstein, was asked on direct if she lived with Alon when they were dating. It was objected to by the government and it was sustained. So she was not allowed to actually say that she lived with Alon. But a blog that was run and published by college roommates of Oren Alexander was allowed in as some sort of manifesto. I've asked everyone I can that was in their circle if they'd ever seen or heard of such a blog. I haven't gotten a yes from anyone. So it's those kinds of things that are interesting to note. Will definitely be noted on appeal, I'd have to imagine. But that's it takes an actually complex view of this case and the judicial theory that was brought in, and not just the hysterical TMZ real deal style coverage, which is very light on facts and substance and more focused on what's driving headlines and screaming. There's allegations in open court that people, invented stories. I think that actually hurts the women's rights movement. It hurts people that are trying to stand up for what's right. And it actually damages the credibility of people that are actually trying to bring legitimate cases forward. The judge did not permit much of the discussion about the civil lawsuits. And I don't believe that the name Evan Torgan, who was the chief, he represented 11 different people. His name wasn't even allowed to be mentioned. So that is something I'm sure will be brought up. Also, did Tal get charged for the allegation with Eric Y? What happens to the co-conspirators? Yes. So Tal Alexander was found guilty of trafficking Lindsay Acree. She identified Eric Yechezkel as the attacker in this instance. Eric Yechezkel was not in the country on the date that Lindsay Acree alleges that this happens. But Tal Alexander was found guilty. Let me repeat that. Tal Alexander was found guilty. And I'm pulling up the verdict sheet here. It says, on the charge of sex trafficking Lindsay Acree by force, fraud, or coercion, we, the jury, find the defendant Tal Alexander, and the answer to that is guilty. So the jury found Tal Alexander guilty of sex trafficking Lindsay Acree. Lindsay Acree has identified in a photo lineup Eric Yechezkel as the second assailant, and he has a rock solid alibi. He was not in the country. You also have the fact about the lease. There was an allegation that happened at a certain address. Tal Alexander did not have access to this address on that day. But the jury did not see that to be disqualifying. They found that beyond a reasonable doubt, this is what happens. Brian T says, Awesome job for your coverage. This is the most outrageous verdict I've ever seen. These guys are taking the heat for Epstein and Israel. I do think that there is something about the Epstein and Israel side. I do think that the fact that they were brought into the Epstein files for whatever dumb reason is crazy. I do think that there are a lot of problems with this verdict as I saw it. Again, I can be wrong. People can see things differently. The jurors made this determination, and it's not a reflection on anybody's analytic skills if they thought that something didn't pass the reasonable doubt standard for them individually. So has anyone ever successfully appealed this? The answer is no, because nobody has ever been charged in this manner, and nobody's ever been charged in this manner. Nobody has faced this. So yeah, no, nobody's ever successfully appealed something like this because it's never really happened. If we're being real here, they're looking at potentially, they're looking at life in prison. How many times have this judge's convictions ruling been overturned on appeal? That's a great question. I don't know the answer. That's something definitely to look into. I know that federal judges certainly don't want to have their convictions overturned. So let me look this up here. Let's see. History of Again, I'm interested in any thoughts, questions, share, like, comment. For anyone who actually has ideas or saw or took the time to actually look at any of the transcript, more than happy to have a discussion about it. It's not really interesting to me to have a discussion of things outside the scope of this trial, because there are so many hearsay things. And that's not to say something did or did not happen, but it's very hard to have a discussion when there's an insane amount of hearsay, an insane amount of piling on, with no way of being able to figure out what's real, what's not. Let's say, for example, people allege that there's bot armies on either side of the aisle. So if there's a plaintiff that is sending bot farms to go after people, or if there are members of the defense team potentially sending bot farms, I have no way of knowing. So when you have unverified things, it's almost impossible to have a discussion. You can't have an informed discussion, because if nobody's behind these allegations, if nobody's behind what's being said, it's almost impossible to have that discussion. People would say, "Oh, I did business with them and they were disgusting." Okay. What does that have to do with whether or not they trafficked women or had a conspiracy to traffic women? Jared says her rulings every step of the way were awful. Question is whether a reasonable juror would have gone another way if her rulings were different. Perhaps. Again, like I go to the Danielle Epstein thing. There's a lot of things that people on the outside that read the transcript saw that members of the jury, assuming they're not reading anything online, would not know. So that's a very fair thing. The question was about trafficking. I didn't understand the trafficking charge. And again, even after all this, there's still so many people that they can't understand that the discussion is about trafficking and a conspiracy to traffic. They keep bringing in all sorts of other things that have really nothing to do with the actual trial. And it's like a broken record discussing trafficking beyond a reasonable doubt. Trafficking. There's a few counts with specific individuals in specific cases. And that is the story. It's nothing else, no more, no less. It's pretty hard to actually have some sort of intellectual discussion about any of these things these days because people are just not interested in actually having the discussion. And unfortunately, that dominates a lot of the discussion online. And it's not even difficult to disprove a lot of how this is done. If you take one look at the transcript and you compare it to what the real deal was summarizing from that day, you're going to see something different. It's as simple as that. If anyone else has any thoughts, questions, or anything else, be more than happy to keep this going. Just again, giving a overview for those tuning in. Oren, Alon, and Tal Alexander were convicted on all 10 counts today. There were 2 counts that were dropped at the end of the prosecution's case. There's a back and forth about why. Prosecution alleging that there was some sort of intimidation by investigators, and the defense saying that there was actually an alibi and that's why it was dropped. But again, not a question for today. The jury found that beyond a reasonable doubt, the Alexander brothers were guilty of all 10 counts. Sentencing is scheduled for August 6th, 2026. I don't believe they can appeal before that, which means that they'll be spending the bulk of this, all spring and summer waiting for the sentencing. I think the anticipated sentencing is going to be close to life. And, that's the facts. So I'll state it again for those who are looking to dunk and say, well, you got it wrong. I'm not in the jury room. I was reading the transcripts and going along with what I saw and where the evidence I thought led throughout the trial. And jury saw it differently. That is how things go. It's not a novel concept. It's the American concept. And there's a lot of things behind the scenes on the side, what's allowed in, what's not allowed in, how things are framed, the order in which things are framed. One can challenge the defense when the defense went along with their summation and then the government gave the rebuttal the next morning, not the same day. The government had a full day to prepare a rebuttal. That could definitely have impacted the way that things concluded. That could have been a strategic error. A lot of things along those ways. So if anyone has any thoughts, questions, ideas on exactly what went down, was the juror who was left stranded in Miami during the snowstorm a male or female? I'm actually not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I know that the juror that was thrown off originally was male, and it was reported that he had basically said that they're not guilty of this. This is crazy, and he was thrown off. But I'm not sure who was there. Thanks for offering the most balanced coverage of this trial, Daniel. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's really crazy because all of these people that were just sending me the most insane commentary, horrible messages. They're getting mad at me as if I'm somehow defending the conduct. I'm not defending any conduct. I'm trying to have a discussion about the trial, and apparently that's a bridge too far. You can't even have a balanced trial. You can't have anything You need to just ignore anything that's written and go forward like that. Again, I've been married for close to 10 years. I don't participate in any of this lifestyle. I don't know anything about it. Not for me. And in no way am I defending this. Um, do you think they'll all serve at the same prison? I'm not sure. There is actually a question about if the state of Florida does go forward with the case against Oren and Alone, they would then come down to Florida, and perhaps it'd be different than Tall. I have no idea, but I think that there's a decent chance they get life sentences. That's a real thing. I believe that part of the problem is the shaming tactic was used to make jurors get to a guilty conclusion. I don't know. I think that look, there's a lot of things that were excluded. Like I said, the Danielle Epstein stuff, the fact that these guys were sleeping with thousands of women was not really brought in. You were presented a picture of them with the women that presented at trial. You weren't really presented the full atmosphere of everything that they were doing. The fact that they had consensual orgies and a lot of consensual sex. I don't know. They're definitely going to appeal. I don't know what their strategy is, but I have to imagine that it's going to be fought vigorously because they're fighting for their lives. How could Tall have been found guilty of the count with a minor? So my understanding is because it was a conspiracy, even uncharged uncharged co-conspirators, their conduct is basically looped into their conduct. So in the case of Isa Brooks, she alleged that Matt Littman, the party promoter, invited her. Dave Rebello gave her a drink, and that there was a 4-person grape of her. The brothers were found guilty of trafficking her because their co-conspirators were the ones who did it. So under that provision, that's how they were found guilty on that. Your coverage was the most unbiased. It's hard right now with Epstein temperature. I don't believe all those charges. They're guilty, maybe some, but not all. I feel the same way. I didn't think the evidence was there. Certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt, but a jury felt otherwise, and it will play itself out in the Second Circuit and otherwise. But I'm not ashamed of seeing the evidence and feeling that it didn't lead where they were alleging it led. I'm not ashamed of that. Sometimes you get things wrong, and sometimes you see things differently than a jury, and that's totally fine. Look at the O.J. Simpson case. Okay. It is what it is. So for those dunking on me, you can have fun dunking on me. Keep going ahead. Have fun dunking. It'll be good. It's not a problem at all. I can handle myself. They hire prison consultants who will make the case to the court for the facility where they will and should serve, likely close to their family. That makes sense. And again, you have to think about the victims in this case. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and be heard. You have to think about them. You have to think about the impact. And I know this is an unpopular opinion. You also have to think about family members of the Alexander brothers and what they're going through, wives, children. A child that's born into the world has no control over their parents' behavior, and now have 4 children that will grow up without fathers at home. That's a sad reality. And I think it's natural to be disturbed by that. I think we all should be disturbed by that. Even if you think that the father deserves to not be at home, you should still be disturbed by that. It would be inhumane to not be disturbed by that. And speaking to people familiar with the thinking and the defense thinking, I know that it's a challenge. It's a, these are human beings. You might think they're evil. You might think they did horrible things. They still have children at home. Oren and Alon are still married. And that part of it is also sad. Period. End of story. Now, you might say that they did this to themselves. It doesn't take away the fact that the children did not do any of this. And that's just a sad reality I think people should take into account. I think this idea of cheering people potentially dying in prison when you're not familiar with all of the ins and outs is a little bit crazy. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions? Please share, like, as much as you can. Keep this going. Obviously, with the trial winding down, I will be, there's not really much to cover. It's just as things go, I will continue to cover if there's anything newsworthy. But, I've made a request to Judah Engelmeyer, the spokesperson for the defense, trying to see if I can actually get see if I can get interviews with them or anyone from the defense team. I'm going to try to keep pushing that. Jay Rafe says, well said. Thank you. And again, I just think people have to look at things humanely. I do feel terribly for those children. And I do feel terribly for the women victims. It's also important to note, and again, I'll say this again, they were not on trial for graping. That is just not what they're on trial for. What happens to their assets now? That's going to be a long and complicated situation because, first of all, they have appeals, and then you have the state case, I believe, and then you also have civil suits. Obviously, there's restitution potentially with this case, a federal case, and they will be fighting the civil suits. So I can't really make an educated guess as to what will happen with their assets. Also, was it the video of Oren with the minor? No, Oren's video became count 10. It was originally count 12, and it was a video of him and Ido Berniker having sex with a woman a teenager who was 17 years, 10 months, consensual sex, non-consensual videography. The woman, this now woman testified that she actually did not even remember this happening. It was clear that they'd all taken drugs and drank a lot. And it's unclear if Oren sent the video to Ido or if Ido actually sent it to himself on Oren's computer. But there was a back and forth about the production and what the main element was. But that was just one count. And the jury of their peers found them guilty of it. It was superseded and introduced. It was not actually included in the original one. So that's the one there. Just a really stupid thing to do. I mean, there's so many stupid things. That's the other thing. So co-conspirators, Ido Berniker is a co-conspirator of that. And again, maybe I'll just bring some of these people up so we see here. So Ido Berniker also had sex with this woman. He was found, he had sex with this woman. He is in the video. I don't know what the government plans to do about that with him, but he's there. You got, let's just bring up his picture here so people see. 1 second. That's Ido Berniker. Ido Berniker is the second person in the video. What will happen? I don't know. He is a co-conspirator in this. He didn't testify, but he is a co-conspirator who had sex with this woman on video with Oren Alexander. And Oren is found guilty. So what will happen to Ido? This is a minimum 15 years. It's a 15-year statutory minimum. I don't know. You also have Eric Yechezkel. Eric Yechezkel is also seen as a co-conspirator by the government. You got Eric right there. And he's seen as co-conspirator with the Alexanders. He was the one who said tequila and Xanax. What is that? You got it wrong. Let's see here. Wow, I got it wrong. Wow. I didn't think that it was beyond a reasonable doubt. I was wrong. The jury felt otherwise. Melissa Mahoney, wonderful. It's not like I got you. I make predictions on YouTube and Substack and X, and I speak honestly. So, yeah, I got it wrong. You got me. Woo! Like, what exactly are you trying to prove here? That the 12 jurors saw it differently than I did on a number of counts? I'm the first to admit it. Not even embarrassing. This is the part that confuses me. There are so many co-conspirators. When are charges going to drop on these guys? And what will happen once they go to trial? I don't know. I mean, there's a few guys here I'd be pretty nervous. Here. I have no idea what is flying because there's a lot of stuff. They allege that they're co-conspirators. I mean, look, you got this guy here. This guy right here, 1 second. Julian, he's seen as a co-conspirator, and he's still listed on the Douglas Elliman website. So what's going to happen here? I don't know. Is someone going to want to do business with him? He's listed. He's talked about as going on these parties, retreats, doing whatever he's doing with the Alexander brothers. They were just convicted. So what's going down? Is the government going to let this go? Or are they going to go after more people? I don't know. Because part of the theory, and certainly the theory in detention, pretrial detention, was that they were dangerous or posed a flight risk or a threat to the safety of the community. So how does that change with the alleged co-conspirators? What's the difference? Like, why are the co-conspirators not there also? I don't know. I mean, I don't work for the government. I have no idea. But, that is something that's definitely worth examining and challenging. I just think it is a very interesting phenomenon. And again, I'll go here. I'm going to pick up some of the people just so you understand the circle that they were running in. When people say, oh, everybody knew this, everybody knew that. Let's just be very specific. about what we're talking about here. Okay. 17 year. No, actually, Melissa, I'm going to bring this up for Melissa. Um, no, actually, there was an issue about whether or not the birth certificate of this person was valid. So it was an issue that was brought in. That's why I mentioned it. And also, unfortunately, because of the Epstein hysteria, you actually have to mention these things. There's a big difference when people say minor. It was consensual in the state of New York. And the video part was the non-consensual part because someone under the age of 18, according to federal law, cannot consent to it. But with the Epstein hysteria and all the other hysteria, people might think that when you say minor, you're talking about a 7-year-old. That's why I say that. So enough of that one. Yeah, hosting a fundraiser here, Ellie Beer, Susan Bordeaux, Howard Lorber, 2018. Saren Shvu, Michael Shvu, Tental, 2019. Charlie Walk, Benny Shabtai, Nicole Fuller, Michael Bola. I mean, look, you get the point here. Gus Rubio, Jay Parker, 2015. So the question is, what's the next shoe to drop? What's going to go? What's going to happen? I really have no idea. I've just been trying to cover these things objectively down the middle. And as Melissa is nice enough to point out, I did get it wrong. I thought that the evidence was clearly different than the 12 jurors thought. But we can all agree that they did disgusting things. And I am in no way defending their behavior. So that's what's going on. That's what happened in this trial here. Any thoughts, questions before I wrap up here? Please drop them. Of course, please like and share so people can actually see and appreciate this. I will be looking out for other cases that are similar because I do actually just enjoy covering the legal system. I do think it is fascinating. They will be appealing. I see this. Well, when can they appeal? The appeal, I believe, is once they're sentenced. So they're sentenced. They're scheduled to be sentenced August 6th, and I don't think that they will be. I don't think they can appeal before that. So that's when they are scheduled to be sentenced. Any intel on what happened? Yes, a lot of crying, a lot of losing it. And again, people say what that is sad. It's a sad thing. It's a very sad day for the family. It's a sad day for their children, their wives. So yes, that's what happened. I don't think anybody should celebrate at that. I think that would make you pretty sick, honestly. So yeah. Was the whole family there? Yes. I believe that both parents and one of the wives and brother was there. That is what I am told. So yeah. I think that's what we have here, but any other questions, thoughts, questions, whatever it might be, please of course, like, comment, share. I'm writing on Substack. You can follow me on Substack. The mail review will be able to cover any appeals or anything, what's going on there. And I appreciate everyone who's tuned in over these past 6 weeks, taking the time to follow what's going on in real time. And any updates, stay tuned to these channels.